Death is not extinguishing the light. It is only putting out the lamp because the dawn has come. Rabindranath Tagore. On a cool morning in March of 1928, English pilot Walter Raymond Hinchliff and Australian actress Poppy Windham set off from the Greenville airfield. Their daring plan? To accomplish a non-stop transatlantic flight, bridging England and New York. Everything seemed smooth initially, as two separate confirmations, one from a lighthouse keeper in Northern Ireland who witnessed the aircraft, and another from the captain of a French vessel, indicated that their journey was proceeding according to plan. But that was the last anyone heard of them. In New York, throngs of spectators eagerly awaited the aircraft's arrival at Long Island's airport, but their anticipation quickly turned into concern. The plane had vanished without leaving a trace over the expansive Atlantic waters. The distressing news reached the home of Mrs. Emily Hinchliff, the pilot's wife, through a morning paper. Struggling to accept that her husband was lost, Emily clung to the hope that Walter would return. But fate had other plans. About a month after the disappearance, Emily received an unusual letter from a woman she had never heard of, Eileen Garrett. Garrett's letter delivered shocking news. Walter Hinchliff had passed away and was now residing in a better existence beyond the veil of death. The message hinted that Walter had important information to pass along and had chosen Eileen Garrett to be the conduit. Emily dismissed the letter outright, suspecting it was a cruel hoax. This dismissal, however, was the prelude to an extraordinary and life-changing series of events. Walter George Raymond Hinchliff, born in 1893, was the Hinchliff family's eldest son. With a background of home education and further studies at the Liverpool Officer Training Corps, Walter distinguished himself as a man of many talents. He spoke 4 languages, had in-depth knowledge of medicine, and actively pursued sports and art. During his military career, Walter served in the artillery before transitioning to the British Royal Air Force during the First World War, where he demonstrated unmatched bravery despite losing his left eye. His courage earned him the Distinguished Flying Cross, a highly respected honor. Following the war, Hinchliff carved a name for himself as a test pilot, mastering over 50 different aircraft models and establishing international air routes. His exceptional flying skills and contributions earned him widespread acclaim, making him one of the top pilots of his era. Emily Joan Jesson, the pilot's second wife, shared a life of joy and hardships with Walter. Together, they had 2 daughters. The journey's second key player, Poppy Windham, was none other than Lady Elsie Mackay. The daughter of Earl Mackay, Elsie led a life filled with rebellion and adventure. A woman of stunning beauty and an uncontainable spirit, Elsie had a reputation for pursuing daring dreams, including the aspiration to make history as the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Eileen Garrett, born in 1892 in Ireland, had a tumultuous early life. Orphaned young, she began experiencing psychic phenomena in her childhood, which shaped her later path. By the time our story unfolds, Garrett was already gaining recognition as a medium capable of connecting the living with the spirits of the deceased. With that said, let me take a moment to acknowledge an Eskimo proverb that just crossed my mind as I'm putting this story together. The proverb says, and I quote, "Perhaps they are not stars, but rather openings in heaven, where the love of our lost ones pours through and shines down to let us know they are happy." As we return to the narrative, the burning question remains, why was Emily Hinchliff reluctant to believe in the messages about her husband? Walter's reputation as an ace pilot gave Emily hope, even amid despair. The fact that he had spent more than 9,000 hours in flight comforted her. However, Elsie Mackay had her own motivations. For her, the transatlantic flight was more than just a thrill. It was a quest to make history. Confident in her pilot's expertise and equipped with the latest Stinson Detroiter aircraft, the duo embarked on their voyage. The plane had been custom-built with financial backing from Elsie's father, James Mackay, who also ensured Walter's life was insured for £10,000, an amount issued in Mackay's name. Walter meticulously oversaw the assembly of the aircraft at the Detroit factory, ensuring that every detail was attended to. Top aviation experts helped him chart the flight path, calculate fuel needs, and minimize risks. Everything seemed set for success as the plane took off on March 13th. Yet the fate that awaited them remained unknown until later discoveries. 8 months after their departure, a section of the plane's fuselage washed up on the coast of Ireland. Its tail number confirmed that it was indeed the wreckage of Hinchliff and McKay's aircraft. A month after the tragedy, Eileen Garrett, during a séance meant to contact a client's deceased relative, encountered an unexpected spirit. Identifying himself as pilot Hinchliff, the spirit pleaded with Garrett to inform his wife Emily and lawyer Mr. Drummond. Desperation colored his messages, and over time, Hinchliff persisted in urging Garrett to act. Torn between fear of ridicule and her sense of duty, Garrett eventually turned to Arthur Conan Doyle, a notable advocate of spiritualism, for guidance. Upon confirming Garrett's claims, Conan Doyle persuaded her to write to Emily and share the messages she had received from the other side. Upon receiving Garrett's letter, Emily's skepticism intensified. The very notion of her husband communicating from beyond the grave seemed ludicrous. She vividly recalled an earlier conversation where she and Walter dismissed spiritualism as nonsense. However, one detail from the letter began gnawing at her. In Garrett's transcript, Walter's spirit had said, "Take a chance. My whole life has been a risk." Those words echoed in Emily's mind, as they were unmistakably the essence of her late husband's personality. Walter's boldness, his courage, and his ability to face adversity head-on were among the traits she had admired most. It wasn't just a phrase, it was a perfect representation of who he had been. As the days passed, Emily found herself obsessing over the letter. Her rational side struggled to dismiss it, but her emotional side wondered, how could this medium have known intimate details about their life, the name of their family lawyer, and other specifics? A new letter from Arthur Conan Doyle arrived just as her doubts began to consume her. "Dear Mrs. Hinchliff, I sympathize deeply with your pain and confusion. I have reason to believe that Miss Garrett's message is genuine, and that your husband's spirit is indeed reaching out to you. Miss Garrett's information about your lawyer and other details could not have been fabricated easily. I understand how difficult it is to accept this, but as someone who has investigated the paranormal for years, I can assure you that credible evidence exists. Please consider meeting with her. Your husband's love for you transcends this plane, and he wishes for your well-being." The letter bore the seal of authenticity that Emily couldn't easily ignore. After much internal debate, she finally agreed to meet Eileen Garrett. But as the day of the meeting approached, her skepticism only intensified. When Emily arrived, she expected to meet a stereotypical psychic, perhaps a woman draped in scarves with a crystal ball on a small wooden table. Instead, she was greeted by an elegant woman in modest attire, with a calm demeanor that seemed almost out of place. Garrett invited her in, offering tea as though they were meeting for a casual chat rather than to contact a departed soul. The session that followed shattered Emily's worldview. As Eileen Garrett went into a trance-like state, Walter's spirit began speaking through her. Emily's jaw dropped as the medium relayed 25 specific facts about their lives. Personal memories, shared conversations, and intimate details about their family and marriage that only Walter could have known. Garrett wasn't guessing or fishing for information. She was recounting precise events, including a few private jokes that had long been buried in Emily's memory. When Garrett described the final moments of the doomed flight, the scene painted was vivid and tragic. Walter had tried to regain control of the plane as turbulence and wind tossed it mercilessly. Elsie McKay had been knocked unconscious during the crash, and Walter had attempted to swim for help, but the frigid waters quickly sapped his strength. He held on for as long as he could before exhaustion claimed him. The final messages from Walter struck Emily deeply. "Tell her that death does not exist. There is only eternal life. My life, where I live now, is a journey into another reality and a change from one condition to another." As Emily wiped away tears, she realized that this wasn't just an ordinary meeting with a medium. It was her reunion with Walter. One of the most pressing concerns for Walter's spirit was Emily's financial situation. After Walter's disappearance, James McKay had refused to release the insurance payout, citing his own grief over the loss of his daughter Elsie. Walter's spirit expressed anger over McKay's actions and urged Emily to go public with the story. Garrett emphasized that by exposing the injustice, Emily could secure the money her family desperately needed. Following Walter's advice, Emily contacted major newspapers, and soon headlines appeared. Widow left in financial ruin after transatlantic flight tragedy. Wealthy industrialist James McKay denies insurance payout. The public outcry was immediate. The scandal escalated so quickly that Winston Churchill, then Britain's finance minister, intervened. By August, McKay conceded, and the full insurance amount was awarded to Emily. Financially secure, she could now provide for her children. But the impact of her experience went far beyond financial relief. Emily was no longer the skeptical woman she had once been. She publicly admitted that the sessions with Garrett had transformed her disbelief into unshakable conviction. My disbelief has given way to knowledge. Now I know that I talked to Walter. He reported on such details of our life together, the lives of our children, and other personal things that only he could know. This led me to the only possible conclusion, that somewhere, somehow, my Walter continues to live. Emily began sharing her story with various audiences, determined to offer others the same comfort she had found. Her message was clear: love transcends death, and the bonds we forge in life are not severed by the grave. But this case was not the only high-profile event tied to Eileen Garrett's remarkable abilities. Just 1 year later, she became involved in another mystery involving an air disaster, this time the crash of an airship. During the early 20th century, Europe had seen a surge in airship travel. These massive, rigid aircraft were marvels of engineering, but they were not without risk. In 1929, England completed the construction of its largest rigid airship. However, by 1930, tragedy struck. On October 5th of that year, the airship met its fatal end in France. Just 2 days later, Eileen Garrett held another session intending to contact the spirit of her late friend, Arthur Conan Doyle. But instead of Doyle, she connected with Captain Herbert Irwin, the commander of the ill-fated airship. Irwin's spirit provided a detailed explanation of the events that had led to the crash. He described weight imbalances, mechanical flaws, and a critical design error that made disaster unavoidable. The airship had struggled to maintain altitude despite the crew's best efforts. It eventually succumbed to its fate. Skeptic Harry Price, known as the Ghost Hunter for his work exposing fraudulent mediums, was present at this session. Initially dismissive, Price carefully recorded everything Garrett said and later consulted engineers familiar with the airship's construction. To his astonishment, every technical detail Garrett relayed was accurate. Price, a man known for debunking paranormal claims, found himself at a loss for words. As Eileen Garrett's reputation soared, so did public fascination with her abilities. Across continents, newspapers covered her sessions with awe and skepticism in equal measure. Some believed she was truly a gifted medium, while others insisted her accuracy could be explained through psychological trickery, selective questioning, or secret research. But what set Garrett apart from other self-proclaimed mediums was her willingness to be scrutinized scientifically. Unlike fraudsters who avoided skeptics, Garrett actively sought out challenges. Her involvement with the American Society for Psychical Research, ASPR, marked a turning point in the study of mediumship. The ASPR, founded in 1885, was an organization dedicated to investigating paranormal phenomena using scientific methods. Its members included respected scientists, philosophers, and psychologists who believed that even the most extraordinary claims should be studied with an open mind. Garrett's collaboration with the Society began as an experiment, but evolved into one of the most extensive investigations of life after death in history. Between 1931 and 1934, Garrett participated in over a dozen controlled experiments designed to test the legitimacy of her spiritual abilities to see other worlds. In these experiments, she was placed in various conditions meant to eliminate the possibility of fraud. For example, in one experiment, Garrett was given sealed envelopes containing questions from participants. She was not allowed to see the contents of the envelopes, yet she provided answers that astonished the scientific team. Her responses included detailed information about deceased relatives, specific life events, and personal anecdotes that participants confirmed as accurate. One case involved a man seeking closure after the sudden death of his brother. Garrett described the brother's physical appearance, cause of death, and even a childhood memory involving a carved wooden boat. The accuracy of her descriptions left the man in tears. When asked how she could know such things, Garrett explained, "I don't know exactly how it works. It's as though their memories and emotions become part of me temporarily. I see flashes of their lives, hear their voices, and sometimes feel their emotions. It's not perfect, but it's real." Psychologists offered several theories to explain her accuracy. Some suggested she had an extraordinary ability to pick up on nonverbal cues, body language, and emotional states, which allowed her to make educated guesses. Others argued that she had a photographic memory and could recall obscure details from conversations or documents she had encountered in the past. However, these explanations fell short when applied to cases where Garrett provided information that could not be traced to any previous encounter. For example, in one session, she described a family heirloom, a locket with an engraving on the inside cover that even the owner had forgotten about. When the locket was retrieved from storage and opened, the engraving matched Garrett's description perfectly. This and other cases led some scientists to propose more radical explanations, including the possibility that human consciousness could extend beyond the physical body and access information from a collective unconscious or spiritual dimension. Dr. J.B. Rhine, a pioneer in parapsychology, believed that Garrett's abilities warranted further investigation. He argued that dismissing her as a fraud without sufficient evidence would be a disservice to science. During World War II, Garrett's workload increased dramatically as thousands of families sought her help in contacting loved ones who had gone missing or died in combat. The emotional toll of the war was immense, and for many, Garrett's sessions provided a glimmer of hope and comfort. Soldiers' mothers, widows, and even high-ranking officers turned to her for answers. One particularly moving case involved a woman named Margaret who had lost her only son in the Battle of Britain. Desperate for closure, Margaret attended a session with Garrett. As the medium entered her trance, she described the young pilot in detail. His uniform, his favorite leather jacket, and the good luck charm he always carried, a silver coin given to him by his mother. Garrett then relayed a message, "Tell Mom I'm okay. I'm not in pain anymore, and she shouldn't blame herself for encouraging me to join the Air Force. I made that choice because I wanted to protect her and everyone I love." Margaret sobbed uncontrollably, but they were tears of relief. The guilt she had carried for months began to lift. After the session, she told reporters, "I don't care what the skeptics say. I know I spoke to my son today, and that's all that matters." Garrett often reflected on the ethical responsibilities that came with her gift. She understood that her clients were vulnerable and that giving them false hope could cause more harm than good. Unlike fraudulent mediums who exploited grief for financial gain, Garrett saw herself as a healer. She never charged exorbitant fees and often conducted sessions for free, especially for those who couldn't afford her services. Her mediumship gift further placed her at the heart of a growing debate between religious leaders and societal spiritualists in the early 20th century. At that time, many viewed science and religion as being at odds, particularly when it came to questions about the afterlife. Some religious leaders were hesitant to endorse mediumship, fearing it contradicted traditional teachings about the soul and the afterlife. Billy Sunday, a famous American evangelist who preached against spiritualism, denouncing it as deceptive, evil, and contrary to Christian teachings. G. Campbell Morgan, a well-known British evangelical preacher, condemned spiritualism with all his heart. According to him, it is a threat to biblical Christianity. In Christianity, for example, communication with the dead was often viewed with suspicion, rooted in biblical passages that warned against necromancy. However, other denominations embraced Garrett's work as evidence of God's continuing relationship with humanity beyond death. The Anglican priest Reverend Charles Drayton Thomas became a notable supporter of mediumship. He had conducted his own experiments with mediums, particularly Garrett, and concluded that spiritual communication did not conflict with Christian doctrine. He stated, and I quote, "If we believe in a God who is eternal and in souls that live on, then why should we believe that death is an impassable barrier?" Garrett herself remained religiously neutral but welcomed the spiritual conversations her work inspired. She once said, "I am not here to challenge faith. I am here to demonstrate that what you call faith and what I experience as reality may in fact be one and the same." On the other side of the debate, scientists like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung viewed mediumship through the lens of psychology. Freud, who was highly skeptical, suggested that mediums tapped into their subconscious minds rather than communicating with external spirits. He proposed that unresolved trauma, repressed memories, and emotional needs shaped the messages mediums delivered. Carl Jung, however, had a more nuanced perspective. While he agreed that the subconscious played a role in mediumship, he also believed in the existence of a collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of memories and symbols that transcended individual experience. Jung was intrigued by mediums like Garrett, suggesting that they might access this collective realm during trance states. In a letter to a colleague, Jung wrote, "We should not be quick to dismiss the medium's experience as mere fantasy. There may be truths embedded in their visions that reflect universal archetypes, if not actual encounters with the departed." Garrett was aware of these differing opinions and often incorporated them into her public discussions. Rather than refuting psychological explanations, she embraced the complexity of her experiences, saying, "Perhaps it is both. Perhaps I access my own mind and the minds of others in a way science cannot yet explain." One of Garrett's most publicized cases came in 1933 when she was invited to hold a session for the famous explorer Sir Hubert Wilkins. Wilkins had been searching for his lost friend, the Arctic explorer Roald Amundsen, who had vanished during a rescue mission. Desperate for answers, Wilkins turned to Garrett, hoping her abilities could shed light on Amundsen's fate. During the session, Garrett described an Arctic scene with crashing ice, biting winds, and a broken aircraft submerged beneath the freezing waters. She relayed a message from Amundsen, who reportedly said, "I am at peace. You must not risk your life searching for me any longer." The specificity of Garrett's descriptions, including details about the wreckage and location, stunned Wilkins. Although Amundsen's body was never found, Wilkins later wrote in his memoir that Garrett's session had provided him with closure. He wrote, "Whether or not you believe in the supernatural, I know that what she told me allowed me to let go of the guilt and the burden I carried." Despite such testimonials, Garrett continued to face criticism from prominent skeptics. Harry Price, the ghost hunter who had initially tried to expose her during the airship session, remained one of her fiercest critics, even after admitting her accuracy in some cases. He later published a book titled Confessions of a Ghost Hunter, in which he suggested that even genuine mediums could be unconsciously influenced by suggestion or environmental cues. Other skeptics argued that Garrett's fame gave her access to privileged information, allowing her to research her subjects beforehand. But Garrett refuted these claims by offering impromptu sessions in controlled environments where she had no prior knowledge of the participants. She invited skeptics to observe these sessions, and many left with more questions than answers. In the mid-1930s, Garrett participated in a groundbreaking series of experiments at Duke University's parapsychology laboratory, led by Dr. J.B. Rhine. These experiments aimed to test her abilities under extreme conditions, including sensory deprivation. In one experiment, Garrett was placed in a soundproof room with no access to external stimuli. She was asked to describe events or relay messages from deceased individuals while researchers monitored her brain activity. To the astonishment of the scientific team, Garrett's accuracy remained consistent, even when all potential external influences were removed. Dr. Rhine later wrote, "While we cannot conclusively prove that Eileen Garrett communicates with spirits, we can say with confidence that her abilities defy conventional explanation." Garrett's involvement in scientific research did not go unnoticed by the public. Her sessions were frequently covered by major newspapers, and she became a household name. However, Garrett was not content with fame alone. She believed that her work had the potential to revolutionize our understanding of human consciousness and sought further validation from the scientific community. In 1941, she published a book titled My Life as a Search for the Meaning of Mediumship, in which she reflected on her experiences and the ongoing quest for answers. The book became a bestseller and sparked renewed interest in parapsychology. Behind the public persona of a confident medium, Garrett faced personal struggles. The emotional toll of constantly engaging with grieving families weighed heavily on her. She often spoke of the emotional residue left behind after sessions, describing it as a feeling of carrying others' grief within her. She also faced backlash from a Vatican group that accused her of leading people astray. Garrett responded with grace, saying, "If offering comfort and healing is considered wrong, then I am willing to bear that burden." In 1951, Garrett experienced a personal loss when her closest friend and mentor, Sir Oliver Lodge, passed away. Lodge had been a physicist and spiritualist who supported her work from the beginning. Garrett said that Lodge contacted her from the other side, providing her with reassurance and guidance during her darkest moments. In her later years, Garrett focused on mentoring young mediums and promoting ethical practices within the field. She established scholarships for students interested in studying parapsychology and funded research projects that sought to bridge the gap between science and spirituality. Garrett passed away in 1970, leaving behind a legacy that continues to influence discussions about life after death. Her work inspired future generations of researchers, including Dr. Ian Stevenson, who conducted groundbreaking studies on reincarnation and posthumous communication. Today, Eileen Garrett's name is still cited in debates about mediumship, consciousness, and the afterlife. Documentaries, podcasts, and academic papers often revisit her cases, using them as examples of the unexplained phenomena that continue to baffle scientists and mystics alike. Today, several institutions, including the University of Edinburgh's Koestler Parapsychology Unit, continue the type of research Garrett was involved in, studying topics like near-death experiences, telepathy, and posthumous communication. Dr. Ian Stevenson, one of the most famous modern researchers of the afterlife, often cited Garrett's cases as examples when discussing mediums who made verifiable claims. Stevenson's own research on reincarnation complemented Garrett's work in mediumship by suggesting that the soul continues in a different form after physical death. Though Garrett did not specifically study reincarnation, she respected the work of those who did, once saying, "Whether through reincarnation or communication, life after death is the world's biggest mystery waiting to be solved." The mystery of death is not the end of the soul's journey. It is the beginning of a new chapter that defies our current understanding. Dr. Ian Stevenson. One of Garrett's most notable contributions to parapsychology remains her involvement with the Hinchliff case. Today, this case is often revisited in scientific discussions because of its combination of circumstantial evidence, verified facts, and Garrett's documented psychic sessions. Skeptics have argued that Garrett could have acquired the information through research or suggestion, but others point out that many of the details were unknown to the public at the time of the sessions. In a recent study published in Parapsychological Review, 2021, researchers analyzed the transcripts of the Hinchliff sessions using modern linguistic software to determine if Garrett exhibited any signs of cold reading, a common tactic used by fraudulent mediums. The study concluded that Garrett's responses did not follow the typical patterns of suggestion-based communication. Instead, her answers were highly specific, leaving room for further investigation. Additionally, advancements in neuroscience have led to new interpretations of mediumistic states. Modern researchers are studying brain activity during trance states using fMRI scans. Some suggest that mediums like Garrett may enter altered states of consciousness, where they access parts of the brain associated with memory, imagination, and intuition in extraordinary ways. While this doesn't confirm communication with the dead, it does indicate that mediums are experiencing something beyond the normal waking state. The question of whether Garrett's messages were truly from the dead or the result of subconscious processes has fueled debates for decades. Today, scientists remain divided. Neuroscientists generally lean toward the idea that mediumship involves a complex interplay of memory, intuition, and suggestion. But spiritualists continue to argue that science has yet to develop the tools necessary to measure non-physical dimensions of existence. One of the most promising intersections of science and spirituality comes from quantum physics. Some physicists have proposed that consciousness may not be limited to the brain, but could be a fundamental property of the universe, much like gravity or electromagnetism. This concept, known as quantum consciousness, suggests that consciousness could exist independently of the body, potentially supporting the idea of life after death. Dr. Stuart Hameroff, a leading researcher in quantum biology, stated, "It is possible that what mediums like Garrett experience is a form of non-local communication where information is not bound by space or time." If proven, this theory could bridge the gap between spiritual beliefs and scientific inquiry, validating Garrett's work in ways previously unimaginable. While Garrett is best known for her high-profile cases involving public figures, she also spent much of her career helping ordinary families. Her sessions often brought comfort and healing to those grieving the loss of loved ones, and the emotional impact of these experiences cannot be overstated. The case of the Sullivan family from New York. In 1948, they approached Garrett after the sudden death of their teenage son Mark in a car accident. During the session, Garrett described a blue baseball glove, a family heirloom that Mark had cherished. The Sullivans confirmed that Mark was buried with the glove, a fact unknown to anyone outside the family. Garrett also conveyed messages about the boy's regrets and reassurances, leaving the Sullivans with a sense of closure. Mrs. Sullivan later wrote in a letter to Garrett, "We entered that session as skeptics, and we left with open hearts. What you did for us cannot be measured in words or money. You gave us peace." To protect her reputation, Garrett, during her life, actively supported transparency and ethical standards in mediumship. She advocated for regulation and testing, believing that only those who passed scientific scrutiny should be allowed to practice. Her efforts helped establish guidelines for ethical behavior in the field, which are still referenced by modern organizations such as the British College of Psychic Studies. In her final years, she focused on writing and mentoring. Her books, including Awakening to the Unseen and Beyond the Veil, explored the philosophical implications of her experiences. In her final interview before her death in 1970, Garrett was asked if she feared death. She smiled and said, "I do not fear death because I know it's not the end. I have seen too much, felt too much, and learned too much to think otherwise. Death is merely a threshold, and beyond it lies another adventure." Her passing was marked by tributes from spiritualists, scientists, and ordinary people alike. The legacy she left behind is multifaceted, part scientific, part spiritual, and wholly remarkable. Death is but a door. When it closes on one side, it opens to a new realm of possibility. Eileen Garrett. Perhaps Garrett's greatest contribution is the bridge she built between science and spirituality. She showed that it is possible to explore the mysteries of the afterlife with both open-minded curiosity and scientific rigor. As humanity continues to search for answers, her work remains a guiding light for those who believe that death is not the final chapter. The internet has revolutionized access to information about psychic phenomena, creating online communities dedicated to mediumship, life after death, and paranormal investigations. Modern mediums often cite Garrett as a pioneer who legitimized their field by participating in controlled experiments. Her documented sessions are still referenced in online discussions, social media forums, and websites focused on spiritual development. Live-streamed mediumship sessions have become increasingly common, with digital audiences participating in real time. Some mediums even use technology-assisted platforms to analyze audience responses and validate details, a modern twist on the techniques Garrett employed in her era. But the central question remains the same. Can mediums truly bridge the gap between the living and the dead, or are they tapping into the power of suggestion and the human need for comfort? The past few decades have seen significant scientific advancements in understanding altered states of consciousness, which may further shed light on Garrett's experiences. Research in brain imaging, quantum physics, and parapsychology has opened new avenues for exploring phenomena once deemed purely spiritual. Modern neuroscientists have used functional MRI, fMRI, to study the brain activity of mediums during trance states. Research conducted by Dr. Julie Beischel at the Windbridge Research Center revealed that during mediumship sessions, specific regions of the brain associated with intuition and memory are highly active. This finding suggests that mediums may access subconscious information in ways that defy ordinary cognitive processing. Quantum theories have also gained traction in discussions of consciousness and the afterlife. Dr. Stuart Hameroff's research on quantum consciousness posits that consciousness may be a fundamental aspect of the universe, independent of the brain. If true, this theory could explain how mediums like Garrett access information beyond physical reality. Hameroff has suggested that mediums may serve as receivers of non-local information, much like radios pick up broadcast signals. Studies of near-death experiences, NDEs, have revealed parallels with the descriptions provided by mediums during posthumous communication. Dr. Bruce Grayson, a leading researcher in the field, found that people who have had NDEs often describe encounters with deceased loved ones, visions of light, and a sense of peace. Experiences consistent with the messages conveyed through Garrett's mediumship. Perhaps we are not physical beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a physical experience, said Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Mediumship not only affects those seeking communication with the dead, but also profoundly impacts the mediums themselves. Garrett often spoke of the emotional toll her work took on her, especially when dealing with grieving families or conveying difficult messages. Garrett acknowledged that her gift came with challenges, particularly when she felt responsible for helping people navigate their grief. In one interview, she admitted that the most difficult part of her work was witnessing the raw pain of loss and the expectations placed on her to provide healing. She once said, "There were nights I could hardly sleep, knowing that the words I spoke might be the only comfort someone would ever receive." Despite the burden, Garrett found solace in knowing that her sessions often brought closure and healing. In cases like the Sullivan family, the ability to convey messages from beyond gave grieving individuals a renewed sense of purpose and peace. Psychologists around the world even went further to explore the possibility that Garrett's sessions were influenced by suggestion, where clients unknowingly provided cues that the medium could interpret. While suggestion may account for some cases, it cannot fully explain the precise technical details Garrett conveyed in sessions like those involving Captain Hinchliff and Captain Irwin. In every encounter between science and the unexplained, there lies a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Dr. Brian Weiss. Even in today's world, Garrett's mediumship raises profound questions about the nature of life, death, and consciousness. This idea currently resonates with many spiritual and religious beliefs, but also challenges traditional scientific paradigms. Garrett's messages often emphasize that consciousness survives bodily death, aligning with the beliefs of various spiritual traditions. In Hinduism and Buddhism, for example, the concept of reincarnation implies that the soul continues its journey in different forms. Garrett's descriptions of the afterlife, where souls transition to new realities, mirror these ideas. Garrett believed that mediums have a moral obligation to act with integrity, particularly when dealing with grieving families. Her ethical stance influenced modern guidelines for mediums, emphasizing honesty, compassion, and the importance of not exploiting vulnerable individuals. While science has made significant strides in understanding the brain and consciousness, it has yet to provide definitive answers about life after death. Garrett's work suggests that science and spirituality need not be mutually exclusive. Instead, they can coexist, with each offering valuable insights into the human experience. Mediumship is more than a niche belief system. It taps into a fundamental human need for connection, closure, and meaning. Across history and cultures, the idea of communicating with the dead has been a unifying theme, from ancient tribal rituals to modern spiritual movements. In many ancient societies, mediums or spiritual intermediaries were regarded as vital links between the human and spirit worlds. Shamans in indigenous cultures often performed rituals to connect with ancestors, seeking their guidance on matters ranging from community survival to spiritual growth. The ancient Egyptians believed that priests could summon the spirits of the dead for divination, while the Greeks consulted oracles, such as the Pythia of Delphi, who allegedly communicated with the gods and spirits. Similarly, in East Asia, practices such as ancestor worship are common, where offerings are made to deceased family members to maintain their favor and guidance. These cultural parallels highlight that the desire for connection with the afterlife isn't exclusive to any one region or time period. It's a deeply ingrained human yearning. Garrett's sessions didn't just focus on individual loss. They often touched on broader themes of spiritual continuity and universal connectedness. This global relevance made her work resonate beyond the borders of Britain and the United States. For instance, when her case involving the crashed airship reached international audiences, it opened dialogues about how different cultures perceive death and the afterlife. The relationship between mediumship and religion has long been complicated. While some religious institutions have embraced mediumship as a divine gift, others continue to view it as heretical and fraudulent. The Bible contains numerous instances of spiritual communication, from Jesus' transfiguration alongside Moses and Elijah to King Saul consulting the Witch of Endor. Despite these examples, many modern Christian denominations condemn mediumship, viewing it as a practice that opens the door to deceit and malevolent spirits. The 19th century spiritualist movement, which emerged in the United States and quickly spread to Europe, provided a more accepting framework for mediums like Garrett. Spiritualism posited that the living could communicate with the spirits of the dead, and seances became popular social gatherings. Prominent figures like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle championed the movement, lending it credibility among the upper classes. Many grief counselors today incorporate elements of Garrett's teachings into their practice. Her emphasis on finding closure through posthumous communication has inspired therapeutic approaches that encourage the bereaved to maintain symbolic connections with their loved ones. Her impact can be seen in the work of contemporary mediums such as John Edward and Teresa Caputo, who combine traditional mediumship with modern entertainment. However, some critics argue that these television mediums lack the depth and integrity that defined Garrett's career. As technology advances and our understanding of consciousness deepens, the debate over mediumship shows no signs of fading. Scientists continue to explore whether phenomena like those experienced by Garrett can be explained through natural processes or whether they point to something more profound. Years later, Garrett's influence extended into modern parapsychological methods, such as the Ganzfeld experiments. In these experiments, participants are placed in sensory isolation and asked to describe images or scenes being telepathically transmitted by another individual in a separate room. Garrett's earlier work laid the foundation for this research, as it highlighted the importance of reducing external stimuli to access psychic information. However, despite numerous experiments, skepticism persisted. Critics often argued that neuroscientists typically argue that consciousness arises from complex interactions within the brain. When the brain ceases to function, they assert, consciousness ceases as well. However, Garrett's experiences, along with countless near-death experiences, NDEs, reported worldwide, challenge this view. NDEs often include strikingly similar phenomena: the sensation of leaving the body, traveling through a tunnel, meeting deceased relatives, and experiencing an overwhelming sense of peace. Many who have had NDEs describe vivid, coherent experiences despite being clinically dead, when brain activity should be minimal or non-existent. Garrett frequently stated that consciousness wasn't bound by the physical body. In one of her lectures, she remarked, "The soul is like the wind, invisible but undeniable in its presence. You may not see it, but you feel its effects everywhere." Another powerful case involved a grieving mother who sought Garrett's help after losing her teenage daughter in a car accident. During the session, Garrett described the daughter's final moments and relayed messages that provided comfort and closure. The mother later confirmed that several details Garrett mentioned, such as a stuffed animal the daughter kept hidden in her room, were known only to family members. This session not only eased the mother's grief, but also prompted her to become an advocate for studying psychic phenomena. She believed that if more people understood the potential for posthumous communication, they would experience less fear and sorrow surrounding death. Studies in grief counseling have shown that belief in an afterlife or communication with the dead can significantly reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. Garrett's clients often reported feeling a renewed sense of purpose and peace after their sessions. The knowledge that their loved ones were at peace helped them process their loss and move forward. Critics argue that the psychological relief experienced by clients may simply be a placebo effect. They contend that even if the messages aren't genuine, the mere belief in their authenticity can provide emotional healing. However, proponents of mediumship believe that the depth of the messages, often containing specific details unknown to the medium, suggests something more profound than placebo is at work. Today, mediums use social media, online platforms, and television to reach broader audiences. Shows like The Long Island Medium have popularized mediumship, though not without controversy. Some argue that the commercialization of mediumship diminishes its spiritual significance, while others see it as a natural evolution of the practice. Here are a few other lesser-known stories of Garrett and how she helped humanity during her time on Earth. In 1942, Garrett was approached by the family of a young boy who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances in rural England. The boy, James, age 8, had last been seen playing near a wooded area behind his family's cottage. After several days of intensive searches with no success, the family turned to Garrett as a last resort. During the session, Garrett described a series of vivid visions involving James. She saw the boy wandering through the woods and stumbling upon a dilapidated shack covered in ivy. According to Garrett, the child had taken shelter there during a rainstorm but had injured himself and could not leave. Garrett was able to give specific directions, down a path marked by a large oak tree with a gnarled trunk leading toward the shack. The search party acted on Garrett's vision, and within hours, James was found exactly where she described. Though weak and dehydrated, he was alive. The family later credited Garrett with saving the boy's life, but she remained humble, saying, "I simply tapped into what James wanted someone to know." This case went largely unnoticed by the media because the family, wishing to protect their privacy, asked Garrett to keep it confidential. Only after her death were the details revealed in her private letters. Number 2. The mystery of the lost heirloom. In the summer of 1936, an elderly woman named Mrs. Beatrice Warwick contacted Garrett about a missing family heirloom, a valuable diamond brooch that had been in the family for 3 generations. The brooch had mysteriously disappeared from her locked jewelry box, and after weeks of searching, no one could locate it. Garrett agreed to a session, and within minutes she received what she described as a mental image of the brooch resting inside a velvet-lined drawer in a wooden writing desk. The desk, she explained, had once belonged to Beatrice's late husband and had since been moved to the attic. Mrs. Warwick was skeptical but followed Garrett's instructions. To her astonishment, she found the brooch exactly as described, tucked beneath old letters in the drawer. Garrett explained that the brooch had likely been placed there by the late Mr. Warwick before his passing, perhaps intending to hide it temporarily. Garrett later commented on this case, stating that psychic impressions often come as fragmented images that require interpretation. "It's like seeing pieces of a puzzle," she explained. "The key is putting them together before the picture fades." 3. The Haunted Estate, a story of restless spirits. One of Garrett's most fascinating but lesser-known cases involved an investigation at a large manor house in Yorkshire, England. The family living there had reported strange occurrences, unexplained noises, cold spots, and objects moving on their own. Garrett conducted an overnight session at the estate where she claimed to sense the presence of 2 spirits, a young maid named Margaret, who had died tragically after falling down the main staircase in the 1800s, and a stern but protective figure she identified as the house's original owner, Lord Henry Daventry. According to Garrett, Margaret's spirit was trapped because of unresolved emotional trauma. Garrett relayed the maid's message. She was seeking forgiveness from Lord Daventry for an accident involving his daughter that had led to her dismissal from the household. The family, intrigued by this information, researched the manor's history and discovered that a servant named Margaret had indeed worked there and died under mysterious circumstances. Following Garrett's advice, the family held a small memorial service to honor Margaret's memory and symbolically grant her forgiveness. After the ceremony, the disturbances reportedly stopped. The family wrote a letter of gratitude to Garrett, thanking her for restoring peace to their home. Memo 4. The Letter from Beyond, a Soldier's Final Goodbye. During World War II, Garrett received an urgent request from a young woman named Alice, whose fiancé, Lieutenant Edward Sinclair, had been reported missing in action. Alice was tormented by uncertainty, unable to move forward without knowing whether Edward was alive or dead. In their session, Garrett conveyed a message from a spirit who identified himself as Edward. He described the circumstances of his death, explaining that his plane had been shot down over occupied France. Garrett provided details of the crash, including the location and Edward's final thoughts. "Tell Alice that I love her and that she gave me the best years of my life." Edward also mentioned a letter he had written to Alice before his final mission. Garrett described its contents and said the letter was hidden inside the back cover of a photo album in Alice's home. Astonished but hopeful, Alice searched for the letter and found it exactly as Garrett described. This case received attention in post-war England when Alice shared her story in a newspaper interview, calling Garrett the voice that guided me through grief. 5. The Widow's Secret, a Hidden Life. Revealed in 1953, an elderly widow named Mrs. Dorothy Harris approached Garrett, seeking closure after her husband's sudden death from a heart attack. Dorothy had always believed her marriage was happy and free of secrets, but she was disturbed by cryptic messages she had found in her husband's personal diary after his passing. During their session, Garrett relayed a message from Mr. Harris, who confessed to having led a double life before their marriage. He described a previous relationship and a son he had fathered but lost contact with after World War I. His final wish, conveyed through Garrett, was for Dorothy to locate this son and ensure that he received the family heirlooms he had left behind. Initially overwhelmed, Dorothy decided to act on the information. With the help of private investigators, she tracked down the man, who was living in Australia and had no knowledge of his biological father. Dorothy fulfilled her husband's wish, and the reunion proved healing for both her and her late husband's son. Garrett later remarked that this case highlighted the complex emotions that often accompany posthumous communication. Sometimes, the dead have as much unfinished business as the living. 6. The Woman in the White Dress, a Vision of Redemption. Perhaps one of Garrett's most emotionally charged cases involved a man named Harold, who had been estranged from his sister, Margaret, for more than 20 years. The siblings had grown apart after a family dispute and had not reconciled before Margaret's death. Plagued by guilt, Harold sought Garrett's help to find peace. During the session, Garrett described a vision of Margaret standing in a field of wildflowers, wearing a white dress. She was smiling and held out her hand as if offering forgiveness. Garrett conveyed Margaret's message. "Let go of the pain. Life is too short for regrets." Harold broke down in tears and later said that the session changed his life. He reached out to his remaining family members and repaired broken relationships that had festered for decades. 7. The Child Who Spoke of Reincarnation. In the mid-1940s, Garrett encountered a case involving a young boy named Samuel who claimed to remember a past life. He spoke of being a soldier who had died during World War I and provided detailed descriptions of trench warfare, the names of comrades, and the exact location of a battlefield in France. Intrigued, Samuel's parents contacted Garrett, hoping she could shed light on the situation. During their session, Garrett confirmed that Samuel's descriptions matched documented events from the war. One of the names he mentioned belonged to a soldier listed as missing in action. Although Garrett admitted that she couldn't definitively prove reincarnation, she believed that Samuel's memories suggested a spiritual continuity between lives. Whether it's reincarnation or inherited memory, the soul carries echoes of experiences that defy logic, she said. Garrett's lesser-known cases reflect the breadth and depth of her abilities, demonstrating that her work was not limited to sensational headlines. She touched the lives of countless individuals, offering comfort, guidance, and in many cases, life-changing revelations. Her legacy endures, not only through documented cases but also through the countless private sessions that remain unknown to the world. As Garrett once said, "Every soul carries its own story, and my job is to listen." Dear friends, thank you for watching my video to the end. If you found this narrative compelling, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us, and we hope these messages bring you comfort and understanding. Have a wonderful day. Blessed ones, here is a divine prayer for our loved ones on the other side. When someone we love transitions to the other side, the love and memories we shared do not end, they transcend time and space. Through prayer, we can continue to send them light, peace, and love as they journey through the higher realms. Below is a comforting and sacred prayer you can say to honor their memory. Before beginning this prayer, find a peaceful place where you feel serene and calm. Light a white candle, symbolizing purity, protection, and spiritual connection, to guide your thoughts and energy to them. Feel their presence surrounding you and allow yourself to be enveloped in divine peace. Know that I welcome any signs you wish to send my way. A whisper in the wind, a vivid dream, or the warmth of a memory that brings a smile to my face. As I light this white candle in your honor, may its flame carry my love to you, shining brightly in the spiritual realm. May it symbolize the eternal bond we share, one that even death cannot break. I release you with love and trust, knowing that your soul continues its journey in divine grace and light. When the time is right, we will reunite in a place where there is no separation, only endless love. Until then, rest peacefully in the knowledge that you are cherished, remembered, and loved beyond measure. I bless you, David, with peace, light, and joy as you continue your journey in the heavenly realm. Amen. On the other hand, if it's okay with you, we at Cabera Haven invite you to share just the initials of your loved one's names in the comments section. The initials, along with the day and month of birth, will help us connect with them. We will lovingly include them in our weekly prayers for those who have passed into the light. These prayers are sent collectively by our spiritual community, offering comfort, love, and blessings to all those on the other side. Remember, you're not just ensuring they are remembered, you're surrounding them with warmth, love, and healing through the power of shared prayers. As you light your candle and speak their name, remember that love endures. If your loved one's name is David, say their name aloud to invoke their spirit lovingly and intentionally, as shown in the example below. A prayer of light and love. David, or your loved one's name, I call your name with love, reverence, and gratitude. Though you now walk a path beyond my sight, you will always be in my heart. The love we share transcends time, and I honor you today with this prayer of peace and light. I am grateful for the moments we shared, the laughter, the lessons, and even the challenges that brought us closer. I know that love, once given, is never lost but continues to live in the depths of my soul and yours. I send this prayer as a bridge between our worlds, trusting that my words of love and remembrance will reach you. May you be embraced by the pure light of the universe, surrounded by the presence of angels who comfort and guide you. May you find peace, joy, and healing in the realm of eternal love. David, I imagine you walking among the stars, free from pain and surrounded by beauty beyond description. Endures, and your prayers have the power to reach across dimensions. Let us honor their memory together, bringing peace to our hearts and light to their souls. Though we are apart, our love bridges every distance, and my prayers will always find you. Many blessings to you, Blessed One.